Thanks, Idris. Tonight, we are thrilled to share with you another global game announcement. This comes from one of the most decorated developers in the world, who consistently pushes this medium forward for each of its releases. This studio has been nominated multiple times for Game of the Year here at this very show, and I am beyond grateful that they have chosen the Game Awards as the place for this global announcement.
Well. I doubt any of us could imagine Miyazaki would drop such a bombshell of a tweet on some random Tuesday morning. I remember just feeling awful that day, and bloop, my day was instantaneously fixed with the release of this news. But enough of me. Today we'll go through some of the changes I'd like to see done to the game at the release of this DLC. Fine, I'll admit to the shameless bait. Obviously this isn't a true leak of the patch. I just found the thumbnail to be all too funny to not include that sort of title. Anyway, we'll be going through my self-constructed patch. It will reflect what I acknowledge to be the most ideal changes that could be made in Elden Ring. First of which, being seamless cooperation. Seamless cooperation is a feature a game like Elden Ring would do mighty well with. If there is one universal flaw betwixt all the various Souls games, it's the inconvenient and tedious multiplayer. Not only is it not a given accessible feature and requires you to find the various tools to use, but it also takes time to prepare. The least we could expect is to play the game with some sense of flow, because today we don't play these games together. We guide players through the gameplay cycle. By that I mean that no two players truly commit to the shitty multiplayer system in order to experience the game together. But we usually coerce a friend to play the game after we finish it ourselves, and then act as bystanders to their experience.
What's up here?
Pretty nice. I think it's a like crafting recipe. It's a pretty decent one. It has like the perfume bottles for like damage increase. By calling the feature cooperation, it sure ain't cooperative. So this is obviously a given. Then we have the issue of redundancy. I'll say this now. Axes, flails, clubs, and knives are redundant in Elden Ring, especially when dual wielded. Therefore, I suggest it be reworked somehow. A few ways we could achieve this is by adding the combo properties from earlier games to the weapons, or to change the animations completely. Then we have some new content untied from the rest of the DLC that is essentially free content for the rest of the players who might not have the DLC by the time it is out. These will consist of 3 new Ashes of War and a new talisman. For the Ashes of War, we have 3 new ones that I'm going to call Deflect, Blind Spot, and Crucible Stomp. Deflect is essentially the greatsword parries from Dark Souls 2. In Elden Ring, we have this riposte animation that we do against enemies on the floor or smaller than us. What this Ash of War will essentially do is the same thing as parries do in Dark Souls 2. I feel like it would be a nice addition to the game. And also, it should do an incredible amount of poise damage to bosses that can be parried. Next we have Blind Spot, which is actually an Art of War we had in Dark Souls 3. This Art of War was very terrible in Dark Souls 3, but considering how strong shields are in Elden Ring, we will need a shield-piercing Ash of War for strength weapons. This one makes the most sense to me. Finally, we have the Crucible Stomp, which is more or less what the name entails. Stomp the ground like the Crucible Knights, and shove spikes up your enemy's ass. Very good disruptive Ash of War that I think most players would enjoy. Then we have the case of the new talisman called the Entwining Umbilical Cord. which is already a talisman in the game files but has not made it into the official game yet. The description of this talisman is, changes the demeanor of the wearer's actions, which could be a change in the player character's animations. Essentially a great fashion statement. This addition would be very appropriate to add on to the end of Demi-Human Box's questline. For the end of this section, we'll jump into quality of life changes, or game changes as referred to in the patch notes. This will include a handy new auto-loot feature when riding Torrent, as well as being able to talk with NPCs while on Torrent as well. But most importantly, this patch will increase the amount of legendary weapon types, and remove any Ash of War and or infusion limitations from weapons that are not in the legendary weapon category. Because there are just some weapons in the game that have nonsensical limitations in terms of Ashes of War. The Scarlet Rot weapons in particular come to mind. We'll keep the limitations tied to weapon class though, but otherwise any other weapon that is not considered a legendary weapon should be malleable. As is tradition, we follow along the structure of the patch notes and end up at the PvP exclusive balance adjustments. Whenever these drop, we continue to see improvements to the PvP scene in the game. At this point in time, besides bugs, I see no immediate issues with the balancing. But what we need to see is better variety in terms of defense, mainly in consideration of status effects. So the immediate course of action I would suggest is to improve this list of talismans. Blessed Dew, Immunizing Horn Charm, Stalwart Horn Charm, Clarifying Horn Charm, Mottled Horn Charm, Twin Blade Talisman, Primal Glintstone Blade, Crucible Feather, and last but not least, Godskin Swaddling Cloth. This will help fill out that final fourth talisman slot with something other than the Dragon Crest Great Shield talisman, making defensive play more adaptable. This might also encourage people to make more builds centered around defensive play. Well, defensive play that does not include shameless fingerprint shields. Beside this, I would also like to see parries with more utility than they have now. So to fix this issue, we need to increase the parry windows for the following weapon classes: Colossal Weapons, Greatswords, Curved Greatswords, and finally Colossal Swords. I would also consider the possibility to have parryable jumping attacks, so that there can be a hard counter to builds that abuse the jumping attack feature. It would also just look incredibly cool, let's be honest here. Rounding off, let's talk about general balance adjustments. There are no apparent issues at the moment, but there are a few changes that I think would benefit the state of play. First of which is to increase the damage value of charged heavy attacks across the board. This feature has in many ways become completely desensitized after the introduction of jumping attacks. Not only does jumping attacks currently have more boosters in the game than charged heavy attacks, but they have nearly identical damage values. All the while this can be doubled with the dual wielding feature for jumping attacks. This would give more initiative to throw the attack more often, which in turn increases diversity in playstyle. We also need to see some adjustments on the Ashes of War and Talisman side of things. I won't mention all the changes, but a few examples would be the Kick Ash of War, which I believe would benefit from an instant guard break like in Dark Souls 3. Then we have the Old Lord Talisman, which should be changed to a sense where it benefits spells as well and not just buffs, like extend the duration of Reign of Stars or Nightmane's Mist. This would help the overall quality of the game and just make everything feel more consistent and noteworthy. Well, that'll be the end of this video. I hope you all have a wonderful day and enjoy living. Goodbye.